You're listening to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, the go-to podcast for high performers. I'm Andrew Moses. Each week, you'll hear my thought-provoking conversations with Olympians, pro athletes, CEOs, elite coaches, best-selling authors, and other high performers to uncover their secrets to success. Get ready to be inspired each week when we talk about leadership, teamwork, work ethic, and more. Are you ready? Let's go. Hi, everyone. This week, my guest is David Flink. David is the founder and chief empowerment officer of Eye to Eye, a national nonprofit on a mission to help students with learning differences, specifically those with learning disabilities, ADHD, or other similar challenges related to learning. At a young age, David was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD. He experienced many challenges that millions of capable students with learning differences face every single day. In 1998, while a student at Brown University, David embarked on a mission to build a support network to help young people just like him. David organized a group of Brown University students with learning differences, and the group began volunteering their time at a local elementary school. They led activities and mentored students with learning differences, facing similar challenges to what they experienced as kids. On their first day, David and his friends led an art project with the students and made such a big mess, they nearly destroyed the carpet in the classroom. But the teacher wasn't mad. She saw the impact that David and his fellow volunteers could have on her students. So she told them to clean the carpet and keep going. And as they say, the rest is history. Eye to Eye has since grown into a national movement of college students with dyslexia and other learning disabilities, mentoring similar identifying elementary and middle school students. And today, Eye to Eye is the only comprehensive direct service, outreach, and advocacy organization run by and for individuals with learning differences. Today, David and the team at Eye to Eye empower thousands of students. David and his team imagine a world where one day, all learners will be seen, heard, and valued. For his efforts helping others, David was named a top 10 CNN hero in 2021. David's story is a powerful reminder that anyone committed to making a difference can literally change the world. His story is inspiring and filled with lessons for us all. So let's pull the tarp and get straight to David Flink. Welcome to Everybody Pulls the Tarp, David.
Andrew, amazing to be here. Thanks for having me. You know, I said before we got on, I am such a fan of your show and your whole thesis on leadership and life. So thanks for having me here.
Well, David, it's an honor. Where I want to begin, 1998, you're a student at Brown University and you launch Eye to Eye. Let's start there. What was the inspiration and what does Eye to Eye do?
So I'm somebody with the identity of dyslexia and ADHD. So I struggled a ton in school, primarily with paying attention and reading, which, you know, kind of the things you need to do well in school. And with a lot of blessings and privilege, I made it to Brown. And I realized, number one, not everybody has the luck that I had with the family of support. And also just to name for people who are listening, you know, I'm a white man in America. That's privilege still that we do not deserve. And so it struck me that most people who have learning differences like me don't end up at places like Brown, regardless of race and economic background. You know, when you struggle in school and that's your job, you don't tend to end up in places like Brown. And statistics prove that. And the one thing I didn't have, even with all of the fortune, was somebody who learned and thought like I did, mentoring me along the way. So Eye to Eye was born when I was 18 years old with the belief that maybe I could give back in some meaningful way. And I marched into a local school with no plan, a very ADHD style approach to trying to do some good. No plan, impulse, let's go. And I went and found a teacher in a local school. And I said, hey, her name was Maureen Kenner. I said, Maureen, do you have any kids who learn differently in your classroom? And she had a special ed in the school. And she was like, all of them. And I said, can I mentor some of them? And there was like background check, no, nothing. I was just like, sure. And I began with me and a handful of other students from Rhode Island going in to mentor kids in this local school, and we started making a difference.
So that's just a fantastic story, David. So what happened next? So you're mentoring these kids, you're bringing some others into the classroom as well. When did it become something that you felt like, hey, we have an opportunity here to make a difference, not just in one school, but in hundreds, thousands of schools?
So we're going to pull the tarp, right? We're going to be real on this show, right?
We're going to be real.
The first thing we did was destroy poor Maureen's carpet, like utterly destroy it. We thought we were going to do art with these kids because we wanted them to have an opportunity to feel successful. And art is a great way to do that. And we like obliterated her room quite accidentally. The next day she came in, and I mean, any person in their right mind would have said, we should throw this entire program out. But we all got in it together. And instead she said, I think you're doing something really good here. Please clean up afterward. And, the magic of Eye to Eye began with us finding ways to connect with these kids, many of whom were very different than our background, some of whom had similar backgrounds to us, because as Eye to Eye has grown, now we're in about half the country. We're a very diverse organization. But no matter what, we connect on the fact that we've struggled in school, they're struggling in school, and our job is to ultimately make it so that young people know how to ask for what they need, and the teachers around them can say, yes, I can provide that. So it's been an amazing almost 25-year journey in sort of making a mess, learning from it, and getting better the next day.
David, I'm curious, how did you go about identifying other people like yourself who wanted to give back, to bring with you into the classrooms? How did you find those people?
Even now, unfortunately, there's a lot of stigma attached to having a learning difference because it's invisible and because of the way we often share these labels with the 1 in 5 young people and all people who learn differently. It's very hard, to your question, to find folks, not just that want to give back. I think most people intrinsically really do want to make a difference and give back, but to use this thing that has often been the focal point of their challenge to be actually the leverage point for change. So we got creative. At the beginning days, we would walk around with t-shirts on that literally said, dyslexic on board, or, I wear my ADHD on my sleeve. And, now the language we use is neurodiversity. And we really just take this thing and say, stop pitying, let's own pride. And if we talk about, success stories, and I hope that for folks who are listening, they hear in my story, not that I have been such a success, but that, I'm somebody that by owning this thing that is often considered a difference with pride, that is where you can make a difference and find success in your own life and happiness. That's how we recruited. We said, look, we know that your story doesn't mean you're broken. We know that. And so let's show that. Let's have the courage and bravery to show that. And I'm 42 years old. I work for these young people who are making a difference every day. Obviously, I work more so with the adult educator side of our program. And for those folks, I can do a lot to help them understand, what is it like to learn differently. But really, it's the young people who are leading the change in our organization.
David, was there one challenge in particular as a child or in high school or even at Brown that, it was more profound than maybe others that stood out? I mean, obviously you talked about the fact that you recognized that you had some degree of privilege and that a lot of people like yourself couldn't end up at Brown or wouldn't end up at Brown. But was there one or two challenges in particular that just impacted you more than others?
The number one challenge I had as a kid remains to be the number one challenge I have as an adult. Fundamentally, it is being misunderstood. As a kid, when you have a little less power, being misunderstood was saying, smart looks like this. And smart often looks like, reading out loud, for instance, being able to sit still for long periods of time. And so my challenge was ultimately, I was really deemed the dumb kid or the bad kid. I spent a lot of my time, particularly in elementary school, in the hallway because I just couldn't do the things asked of me. And so, being misunderstood, and I say that as an adult too, is like, hey, I am trying so hard here to show that I'm excited about learning and that I'm excited to be in school, but I'm misunderstood because the way that you have painted this box of what smart looks like, I can't fit in. And I see that happening in the work world. I see that happening in personal lives of folks all the time. And, it's hard. It's hard to be understood. It's hard to understand others. And I think that's really the crux of the challenge we're working to solve here at Eye to Eye.
David, you talked about going into that first classroom with not much of a plan and making a big mess and cleaning up that mess and then, just taking it day by day. But at some point, you started to scale this thing. You started to grow and expand. And, as somebody who has, I built a nonprofit on college campuses for Autism Speaks. And what we did started in college as volunteer work, and then it shifted to more of a kind of a consulting part-time role after college. What we did was we started as volunteers building fundraising events for Autism Speaks at Penn State, where I went to college. And then we had this idea: what if we went from one campus to two campuses and two campuses to four? And we had become really successful at raising money at Penn State. We had raised over 2 years, $300,000. And we had this vision. We said, if we can bring this to other college campuses, we can, infuse energy into this cause from a lot of energetic people. But we can also build this framework where young people, when they're in college and making consumer decisions and personal decisions for often the first time in their life, can just make philanthropy and giving and community organizing something that's kind of near and dear. But, we were trying to do something really good. And a lot of people don't realize, like, even when you're trying to do something really good that seems simple and like natural on the surface, it can be really hard. You can run into a lot of red tape. We were trying to close roads down to do outdoor events, and we were handed big bills on certain campuses for police, and we had administrators who didn't understand what we were trying to do. I mean, we had to pull the tarp every single day just to do something that on the surface was like obvious. This was so good for the community and for so many people. I'm wondering if you ran into challenges like that, doing something that obviously was inherently really good, but did you run into red tape? Did you run into hurdles, challenges? What was it like scaling it?
Yeah, I mean, challenges all along the way. And we could have multiple conversations, I'm sure, just on the like grassroots college piece of it, much less scaling it beyond for becoming a national nonprofit. The early days were things that I actually think we got away with more. I don't know if this relates at some level to your experience, but the one value of being a young person is they are given some grace. And so, when I destroyed the classroom and made it a huge mess, there was grace given to me. When, I forgot to check about like the buses to make sure the kids could get home, and we figured it out, right? Our mentors were incredible and they stayed late. This is the thing about young people. They'll double down. So, we walked every kid home when they needed to get home safely. These were things that now as a nonprofit nationally, we have safeguards for. So the logistics are not the problem, but the actual fundamental challenges remain the same, which is, can our vision, which is really a world that embraces neurodiversity and celebrates it and fights anti-ableism, how can that big vision be something that we do every day, work tirelessly at? And I think it's holding on to the vision really tightly and holding on to the way of getting there a little bit more loosely. So I know that in order to pull the tarp, everybody has to be there to pull the tarp, right? You got to bring your full self and say, hey, sometimes I just have to dig down and dig deep. And I can cite every step along the way. I mean, these were college stories, but our first fundraisers, I did out of my apartment and stayed up all night just to make sure it looked perfect, with recruiting every friend I could. And then now that we have a staff that does that, it doesn't mean I don't ask volunteers to help. I mean, I've come to learn that my main job is to be the chief invitation officer. Everyone listening today, I'm making an invitation to you, whether it be through Eye to Eye or some other nonprofit, just to make a difference and to just step in and try your best.
I think it's such a powerful message that you have, David. You do call yourself not only the chief invitation officer, but the chief empowerment officer. And part of this is obviously empowering the students and the young people and the adults that you support and work with and mentor, but you're empowering so many to empower others. I think that's what's really cool about your story. How have you been able to go about expanding this beyond David Flink, right? Like, there comes a point when something gets so big that maybe it loses some of its like early flavoring that makes it so special, but you've clearly been able to maintain that. How have you gotten bigger, become like the go-to organization nationally for this, and still, kind of stayed true to that core empowerment principle?
Something that we talked about in the earliest days was we wanted to make sure that we built no statues. And what I mean by that is that I didn't want to be a focal point of the organization. I was happy to step in as a shield or a sword, depending on what was going on, to open up space for our young people to lead. I did not want Eye to Eye to be built as some big statue that would last for an eternity. I mean, I wanted us to build a fundamentally an organization that believed in a vision that was solving a problem. And when that problem is, solved, meaning that frankly, young people are seen and heard and valued, and that their allies are mobilized to act and be stepping in to create a world that is celebrating all abilities, frankly. I doesn't need to exist. And, I have other things that I can attend to. I have hobbies. And so, for me, I think that's what's allowed us to continue to push forward. Eye to Eye is very much not about me. In fact, it's not about anyone in particular. It is about celebrating the leadership of young people and bringing people around you who are signed up to pull the tarp, who are ready to roll up their sleeves and get it all done. And I think it also, speaking just a bit about what it is to have like a staff, we're very careful. If we believe that all people have strengths and weaknesses and abilities to celebrate, we're very careful to invite people in and say, this is your job. Do you want to do that job? Are you good at that job? Do you need accommodations to do that job? I am 1,000 things bad at. And the fact that I've still been able to hang around Eye to Eye is that thankfully the things required of me for this work continue to be things that I generally like to do and that I'm, I think decent at. The day that that's not the case, I'll happily sign up to be the janitor if that's the thing that would be best for this organization. And that's really the way we frame leadership. Step in, make a difference. And if it's not a thing you can do, just help find somebody else who can do it.
I think, David, that speaks so well to the everybody pulls the tarp mindset. The everybody pulls the tarp story, as I've told it in the past. And it really comes down to the fact that every job matters. There's always a role for everybody to play. When I interviewed World Cup champion Ali Krieger, she said, Andrew, there's been times in my career when I've been a starter. There's been times in my career when I'm a reserve. I always have a role. I have a role just like the coaches and the medical staff and the equipment staff. And it doesn't matter whether you're a starter, whether you're a reserve, whether you're one of these supporting cast members. You have to do your role to the best of your ability in the moment. And that's how successful teams and organizations are created and sustained. I'm curious, when you're looking to hire people, you're obviously very transparent about the way you do things. What are you looking for? What are you looking for in them?
Yeah, we ask people to show up with their full selves too, right? And really be transparent and really look for fit. For sure, there's a job description that we want to make sure is within the wheelhouse of what folks want to do and can do. But we're really looking for culture fit too. Are you a, pull the tarp kind of attitude? Can you roll up your sleeves and say, okay, we got to get it done? And for me, I can think of a number of examples, actually starting with our young people, which is to say, asking our young people to do something where we've said, look, this experience of having a learning difference might be something that is actually traumatic for you. We're going to ask you to take that thing and make some change in the world so that others don't experience. That's a big challenge. So if we're asking our young people to do that, when people step in to take this as a job, that same level of seriousness is requested. So we don't actually ask anything of our staff that we wouldn't ask of our young people to do. And I think that actually has been the leading challenge for us, and maybe opportunity is a better way to phrase it, because if you can have the bravery and courage to band together, you can do great things, far greater than anything you can do uniquely. While we do say we ask everyone here to show up here to do something that you can uniquely do, and we really prize people's unique abilities, we know we're stronger together.
I think it's so important to set that tone, right? That there's no job that's beneath everybody, or that's beneath anybody. We're all in this together, and there's a degree of transparency and accountability that comes when you do that. I'm thinking back on your story about the paint and cleaning up the paint, and one of these events I ran in college. I'll never forget. We're running these 5K races, pretty big 5K races, and we're closing down streets, and the police are blocking roads, and we're doing these things. You have to have an ambulance on site, right? I mean, this is like pretty basic, like blocking and tackling. And all of a sudden, the day before the event, I realized, I said, oh, we never confirmed the ambulance. We got thousands of people coming tomorrow, and like something very, and the thing about like in State College, Pennsylvania at the time, if you call like in advance, you can get an ambulance to come and volunteer. But now they're all booked. Those volunteer ambulances are booked weeks and months in advance. So I remember you're kind of like, I'm the leader of this thing. The buck stops with me. I start going through the phone book. I start calling I was calling ambulances from, 100 miles away. I just need one ambulance for this event to go off. And it wasn't, we did this for 6-7 hours. It wasn't until 9 o'clock at night. We're literally at dinner, and me and the co-chair of the event, we don't know if we're going to be able to do this thing in the morning. And I get a call from an ambulance, 60, 70 miles away, and they say, we're here to help. We'll be there in the morning. And it was just one of those moments where I think you realize that one, everybody makes mistakes, and that no matter how buttoned up you are with stuff or how many notes you take or how many lists and checklists you have, you can always make a mistake. Sometimes when you make a mistake, you got to dig yourself out of it. And you dig yourself out of it by doing like the kind of non-glamorous, scrappy work that it takes, right? And then when you see someone who says, I can help, and I understand you're in a bind, and we're going to make this happen, we're going to get there tomorrow, that's really special. And I think when that happens, it like motivates you to keep doing that. I'm curious, like, have you had moments like that where you've kind of run into walls, you've done some scrappy things, and things kind of come together in a way, and it just energizes you to keep going?
Yeah, I'm thinking about the first time we gathered our young people. So the way that our chapters work, as I mentioned, about half the country. So once a year, we bring together young people from around the country for, I kind of call it LD is short for learning difference. So it's like LD Palooza. I mean, it's so fun. We just, you can imagine a couple hundred young people coming together, all fired up to change the world. And the first time we did that, you have to understand if you're looking at what this might be from the outside, this is an insurance nightmare. No university would typically want this, right? And, we convinced everyone we needed to, this should happen. It's never happened. This was the largest gathering of young people who learn differently to have ever happened. And each year we've done this conference, it's gotten bigger, including this year. I'm so excited after the pandemic, we'll be gathering in August. And it'll be the largest gathering of young people who are neurodiverse ever. But going into this thing, it's not so much that we forgot anything, but there was this huge weight that people who are neurodiverse are deviants. Something bad is going to happen. And so, I'm getting phone calls from everyone saying nothing. How can you guarantee that nothing bad is going to happen? That this isn't going to be a disgrace to the university, a disgrace to I, a disgrace to our board of directors. I'm like, let me tell you, these are the people who are going to change society. And if you believe in that, then you don't have anything to worry about. First day, everyone's gathered, and all the things that could have happened in gatherings, many people has happened. Flights were delayed, and baggage was lost. And there was one woman who got bit by a bat. She was doing research prior to coming to this conference, and she still came, and we had to go and make sure that she didn't have, some kind of disease. She was fine, thank God. Like, we took care of all those things because we banded together. Everybody pulled the tarp. But I gave a speech at the beginning of that conference, and it was really simple. I said, look, I understand that for some of you, this is the first time you've ever been away from home. This is the first time you've probably been around this many people who learn and think differently. Let me tell you what the rest of the world is saying about us. And I explained, and they know because they have felt misunderstood a lot of their life. So our job while we're here is not just to be trained to be leaders, not just to be able to go back to our communities and make a difference, not just to take this thing that has often been hard and turn it around into something that's going to make the world see all of us differently. This conference has to not only go off flawlessly, it has to be press worthy. We have to change the narrative. And it's not fair that that's the narrative that has to be changed. But there's been a story told about us that we didn't get to tell. So I just shared my reflections of, hey, we can do this. If you believe we can do this, we can do this. That was my insurance policy. And let me tell you, that conference has gone off now for 2 decades. There has never, no one's gone home for bad behavior. There's never been an incident. I mean, I don't know how many youth gatherings happen across the country over the past 20 years where nobody has ever had anything would ever happen. And that's been our case. And it's not to say that accidents don't happen or things haven't been forgotten, but it's because we've shared a belief that we have to change the narrative. And it's more than just for yourself. It's for the generation behind you. And I think when people start living their lives for not just themselves, but for another generation and for others, it's not too much responsibility. It's exciting. It's empowering, which is, I guess, how I got my title.
It must be. David, your story is so inspiring. The way you live your life is inspiring. The way you're motivating others. I mean, that story is like you got up there and you spoke from the heart, and you spoke to people who maybe hadn't thought about it that way, or maybe they were, like you said, and they had felt that way for a long time. But whatever. It really resonated. Do you think there's something about having a chip on your shoulder, having people doubt you, people judge you, that creates this different level of motivation?
There's been some interesting research about this. And I think we've learned for some people, changing the narrative, changing the story about you can be very motivating. And for others, it can actually be very crippling. I think if I'm speaking about my own journey, I think for some number of years, indeed, there was a chip on my shoulder. And what I didn't understand is while it did motivate me, it also was quite weighty. Struggling with mental health, which thank God I got the support I needed so that I could work through that stuff and continue to, especially during this pandemic, take care of myself before helping others. So I think the other side of it is opportunity. You heard me even, I think, in one of the questions, kind of wrestling between the words challenge and opportunity. I think chip on your shoulder is the motivation that comes from challenge. Opportunity is a much more optimistic approach, which is how I've tried to lead, especially in recent years, especially during the pandemic where things felt so hard. And as I look at the generation coming up who I learned from and lead with, they see opportunity. And so I'm constantly, perfection is not possible, not something to even strive for, but the opportunity to grow and learn together, then you're not trying to do any gotchas. You're not trying to, say, hey, you got me wrong. You're just trying to say, hey, there's a way to think about this differently. Join me in going down this path together.
You see so much opportunity, David, and there's optimism in that, as you said. You also mentioned that at some point you might know that your work in this space is done. What do you think is going to tell you that? When do you think you'll say, hey, our work here is done?
Yeah. I think there are external factors and internal factors, and we'll see which ones come first. The external factors that I think about, if you look at public perceptions, just looking at schools, that's the primary focus for Eye to Eye. We understand that 80% of the time, kids who learn differently are in gen ed classrooms. And if you ask those teachers, how prepared do they feel to support kids who learn differently? They'll tell you they don't feel prepared. Why? They get maybe one class, if that, in their training to teach these kids. So what would change when teachers start saying, I feel 100% prepared to reach those kids? You think about the misconceptions. Caregivers, adults, parents, if you ask them about kids who learn differently, they'll tell you they think that the problem is either they don't work hard enough or they're lazy. That perception has to change. So these are some markers. And then, of course, you can look at the really sort of dark statistics. Close to half of our federal prison population is full of people who are illiterate or have a learning difference. This isn't okay. This isn't something that any of us should feel comfortable for. Of course, the opportunity is how can we take these people who were just misunderstanding and put them on a path to be successful and change agents? There's the wonderful statistics around probably many of the people on your podcast who are wildly successful. People who learn differently overrepresent in the C-suite, overrepresent on professional athletes and creatives. But we got to fill the gap in between. So there's external factors, which would tell me, hey, we've moved the needle. Eye to Eye doesn't need to continue to exist. I also just want to name Eye to Eye as an organization run by and for young people. At best, I'm a former young person. My co-creator, Marcus Sutra, always tells me that. He's slightly younger than me, so I'm not sure if he qualifies himself as a young person or not, but he tells me I'm a former young person and he's not wrong. And, this leadership of this movement is fundamentally by people who are living in school, living these lives. And the day that young people tell me I'm out of touch, I'm not listening well, I'm out. And they have every right to oust me. And, my job, as I said, is to serve them.
David, you sure are serving others. You're a TARP puller by every sense of the mantra. And I have had so much fun digging into Eye to Eye, learning more about your story. It's truly inspiring. Thank you for pulling the TARP and leading by example and doing such great work for so many who rely on the great work that you do. Thanks so much, David.
Well, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. And I hope folks who are listening had as much fun as we did.
Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app so you can catch all of our upcoming episodes. And if you are like me and want a world full of TARP pullers, then leave a review to help others find us. You can also follow me on Twitter at Andrew H. Moses. That's Andrew H. Moses. And be sure to sign up for my email newsletter at everybodypullsthetarp.com/newsletter. I'll share tips and insights to help you achieve maximum success and happiness. Today is a great day to pull the tarp. I am rooting for you. See you next time.